All right. Hi, everybody. It's our CFB Talk 180. It's Tuesday night. This is when we like to talk to you about everything that's going on here in college football. My name is Bobak Ha'Eri. Lots of things going on in this offseason. It's been kind of exciting. We had, I guess, an advisory committee, not in a new alliance form, as well as some other issues that we'll want to talk about. I see John's got his hand up. I'll let him up here in a moment. A quick rest in peace to former San Diego State linebacker, better known as actor in movies and TV, Carl Weathers. Just a great actor, someone who's always been enjoyable and someone who's not been afraid to make fun of himself. He passed away at age 76. There's some great photos from his time at San Diego State. Recommend checking those out if you get a chance. I see John has got a request. I'll go ahead and let you up, John. Some other things, apparently one of the smaller pieces of news today, and this has been rumored for a while, but Washington has officially announced Steve Belichick as their new defensive coordinator. So I guess we'll get both Pete Carroll's son and Belichick's son on the same football team with Jed Fish over at Washington. So that's an interesting one. The next generation of that particular college football dynasties together. Whoever knew? Like that's like one of those memes. We'll have a team with Belichick and Carroll on the same team, but which ones? That's what we know. Hey, John, what's going on? How are you?
Hey, man, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. It's just another Tuesday night, another nice time to talk college football. A little tired, but this always kind of perks me up.
Yeah, it's great to hear. I threw a little bit of good humor up into the space. I hope you appreciate it. But the big thing I want to talk about is I probably you saw, everyone saw, um was being regarding Jeff um Hafley. I think I'm pronouncing that correct. The
Yeah.
former Boston College coach that now went over to Green Bay. Can, can we ever explain why we had so many think pieces about the state of college football from the I would say a very dramatic quote from him upon his exit? I I hate hate to hit the violin, but there's not a lot of pity for myself for a guy that made $4 million last year to coach a team to an under 500 record. It seems to me that a very easy solution would be for him to maybe cut his salary a little bit back, maybe hire some guys to help distribute some of his more what was becoming more of a GM role right now in the college football landscape. I don't understand why why we had this pity party for a guy that honestly might not even been the coach after next season for depending on what would happen with Boston College. I think that it's probably easily of all the things I saw last week, it's probably one of the most overblown things I saw personally. But I'm curious of what your thoughts are.
Yeah, that's a great question. So Jeff Hafley, who was up until this past week the head coach of Boston College for several years. Boston College has always been a tough job. He got them at least to one losing record, 6-6 record, and then two slightly winning records. He left to become the defensive coordinator of the Green Bay Packers. Now, I know exactly what you're talking about, and it's a little annoying because there's a topic that is honest and true that is in the middle of all of this, but I feel like there were some pieces that were written and tweets that were made which were kind of using a different situation to kind of as a coat to like coat rack to like hang a different issue on top of it. I've heard that phrase when you try to kind of wedge one topic into another because some people see Jeff Hafley departing college football to just become a coordinator in the NFL as a sign that there's bigger problems with college football coaching. One of the quotes, and I know Pete Thamel, who broke the story, also included a source that said college coaching has become fundraising, NIL, and recruiting your own team and transfers. There's no time to coach football anymore. And I'm not saying that is not entirely without truth. It certainly is a huge part of the college equation, which is different than the NFL, where you can really kind of focus on X's and O's and players are locked in. You're not constantly trying to keep them in place. But it hasn't been all that. I mean, yes, there has been certainly the schedule's gotten a little crazier over the last 5 years, particularly in December. But the best head coaches in college, I mean, the ones that just retired, Nick Saban, he was a CEO type of head coach. He was great at recruiting, and he was great at being a CEO coach. It wasn't like he was doing a ton of X's and O's compared to he was very good at entrusting some very talented people around him. So what people are trying to say Hafley was leaving about, and again, saying like, oh, he just, college is untenable for some of these coaches. It seems a little dishonest, only because the things that they are mentioning are things that some of the best coaches are particularly good at, and maybe that's part of what makes them a good head coach versus like a coordinator. Now, the other kind of things that go in there, and you touched on one of them, I thought, is, while BC is a really tough place like to win, it's a small school. I had a chance to go see a game at Boston College. I recommend it. Or at least just see the campus. It's beautiful. It's it's really funny. The campus is on the border of the suburb of Chestnut Hill and Boston. So the stadium itself is in Boston, and almost the entire rest of the BC campus is technically not in Boston. But it's a cute campus. It's a compact campus. They don't have a lot of students. I forgot what I look that up real quick. Yeah, the total number of students at a Boston college. It's one of the smallest schools in the ACC for certain. Yeah, it's got an undergraduates of about 15,000. So not an enormous school. It's a private school. It's it's not. We're talking about, and maybe we can get to this later in the show, but talking about the new kind of advisory committee or alliance between the Big Ten and the SEC. When we're talking about the what used to call the P5 and now the P4, Boston College is certainly one of the weaker schools. They're in that kind of pool with Wake Forest and Duke, where they don't possess the same ability to necessarily historically compete at the highest levels of college football. And saying all of that, how Hafley did was okay, but it almost seemed like there was a little bit of disgruntlement within the Boston College sort of community, and perhaps next season he might be a bit on the hot seat. That's sort of being compared to the whole situation with um, Chip Kelly at UCLA, perhaps looking at offensive coordinator jobs in the NFL. He keeps getting mentioned for those. As some people in our CFB have put, somebody asked the question, has there ever been a more has there ever been a team and a fan base and a coach more happy to kind of hopefully be rid of each other than Chip Kelly and UCLA at this point? Where heading into next season, similarly, he might be on a bit of a hot seat, but at this point, he's still in his position. So I think Hafley was perhaps a guy, and also again, the final part about the Hafley story is he has an NFL background. Like, I mean, yeah, he's coached a little bit in college since he was obviously a coach offensive coordinator at Ohio State for a single year before taking the BC job. But before that, he spent the majority of the decade in the NFL. So seeing a guy who had been in the NFL who decides to go back into the NFL, not a huge surprise. So those people have been trying to hang this on the stress of being a college coach and how the sport has changed. It felt a little bit disingenuous because there's always going to be guys who prefer to coach in college and guys who really prefer to coach in the NFL. And I don't think there's a wrong answer either way. But going back to how I began that answer, I'm a little frustrated with it only because I think there is a serious problem with overwork in college sports. I mean, in fact, I was supposed to do it on Monday, but we had to postpone for this. Again, with Advanced Media, I do a podcast with Shannon J. Raja, and I'm going to be having actually one of the foremost experts on this topic from the University of Cincinnati, a professor. I'm going to be having an interview with him later this week, and I've been preparing for it and just kind of looking at the work that coaches have to put in, especially not just coaches, but there's a really interesting concept that this professor came up with the radioactive ring around a coach, where the stress on a coach, the stress on the fact that a coach is really year to year, you don't know if you're going to be hired or fired. And that stress tends to bleed into the rest of the staff and not just the assistant coaches, but like the folks that support the team, like the physical, probably the trainers and the medical staff. And it's just this kind of stress that creates a lifestyle that is difficult and kind of crosses that line between being very focused on work to being perhaps a bit of a workaholic. So all of that said, though, the more you look into it, you have to ask yourself the question, there's always going to be people who want to be college coaches. There's always going to be people who want to be at the top level of college, even if it's a struggle of a job. Because if you go to a school like a BC and you do really well, you'll probably get hired by, or at least an offer at an even better program with even more money, unless you decide you want to go in the NFL, or maybe some people really love being at a certain school and retire there. But it's a big question you asked, And I'm glad you did, because it's been one of those big discussion points this week, and how people have been trying to frame Hafley's departure to the NFL. I think it's less a problem with coaching in college in general, although there's certainly a problem. I think it's more of he probably is getting a little tired of BC because it's simply hard to win there, and he's done a fairly decent job, but probably not enough. And he was from the NFL, and he misses the NFL. I think that might be just as explainable. Hey, Ski Master Murphy,
Yeah,
what's going
I
on?
mean,
Oh, sorry.
oh,
Go ahead, John. Go ahead, John.
yeah, I was just gonna say, as a group of five, a fan, but the pity only goes so far, man. I mean, I'm watching coaches that make a fourth of his salary on the group of five level. You know, having I would debate even a more stressful job where you are not only trying to keep your guys, but you're trying to get guys on the P5 and the FCS level to come to your team year after year. And I understand Boston College might have the same finances, some of these teams, but he makes $4 million a year. That you're telling me there's not a couple of dollars that can be thrown to a couple of guys to help him doing some administrative and GM work at the end of the day? I don't know. It's hard for me to look at what his salary is, his performance at BC, and then trying to throw these tears out at him when he says the game is broken and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's part of the issue. There is some of the folks making the comments, like Kirk Herbstreit. You're like, man, I think you've. I know it's coming from a good place, but it doesn't sound all that sympathetic when you have someone who's a
Yeah, Kirk,
millionaire asking us to cry for another
yeah,
millionaire.
yeah, I know. Kurt kills me because that's like a BP executive asking why is global warming a thing? Why are the ice caps melting while he's pumping oil right out of the ocean? That's a whole nother discussion though with an ESPN figurehead talking about the how much college football has changed. Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. One thing also, this kind of just, and I just want to kind of throw this out there. One of the people that has obviously been heavily discussed about potentially replacing Hafley is Bill O'Brien, who was just hired as the Ohio State offensive coordinator. He apparently really wants the job, and they want him. They're just kind of hammering out the details. There was a really hot. I wouldn't say the hottest take, but I feel Dennis Dodd got a little bit of heat for this. But he's like, there's a reason he felt that he would take that job, and it was actually trying to tie it to the Michigan rivalry. Because if Ohio State doesn't beat this is Dennis Dodd. If Ohio State doesn't beat Michigan, O'Brien has to consider he'd get blown out with the rest of the staff. So he said like he'd get fired with Ryan Day and all of that stuff after less than a year, and he thinks there's better security at Boston College. I mean, I have to admit, if Ryan Day were to lose to Michigan this year, it would be, I cannot imagine what would happen, especially with the February national championship that they have won, with all the stuff that has happened since the title game, and all the departures happening at Michigan right now. It was a really, I tweeted it only moments before we started this, because I haven't had a chance to really review as many comments as I'd like to on our CFB, but somebody was talking about, I believe it was in the Jesse Minters departing for, has been finalized as the Chargers' new defensive coordinator. And then there was another coach I know who was also, Mike Elston, was also taken, the defensive line coach for Michigan's also heading to the Chargers. And someone's like, Michigan fan that commented, slow down, Jim, just slow down, take a breather. And then, somebody replied, one of our good friends, Uggo Live 91, Jim takes the oxygen masks and tanks to LA as well. So if it's not bolted down, that's kind of the joke. It's going with Jim to Los Angeles right now. But that's a bit of a stressor. Speaking of which, Ski Masks Murphy, how are you?
Did I? Wait.
Yep,
Okay,
you're
I'm good.
unmuted now.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I'm doing. No, I hit it like 5 times in a row. I don't know what happened, but yeah, I'm doing good tonight. Doing good. I sort of wanted to talk about, I guess, two stories. One to double back from last week. I mean, it's not fully college football related, but it may bleed into it. And then the second one would definitely bleed into college football. I wanted to double back on the story where we talked about sports betting with Keon Booth, and then
Oh,
we ended up
yes.
talking about, and then I ended up bringing up the that Alabama LSU game, and
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that came
and
to a head this week.
I think it was Thursday or Friday. They actually well, he has like a very weird suspension, but also like the whole story behind it is also funny as well. But I guess for anyone listening who doesn't know what happened, basically during the spring last year, basically some weird bets were coming out of the state of Ohio on a baseball game between Alabama and LSU. And basically, through this full investigation, basically found out the coach basically was getting his best friend to bet on the game before he was able to tell everyone that their star pitcher was not going to be pitching that game. And like this text basically saying, "Hurry up, let me know when you get the bet so I can hand my lineup card to the other coach." And basically, his suspension is for 15 years, a show cause suspension. Basically, the NCAA is saying we
Yeah.
can't prove he intentionally tried to lose this game, but if you want to hire him, you're gonna have to show us a good reason why he should still be allowed to coach.
Yeah, I believe he got specifically a 5-year suspension and then a 15-year show cause. So yeah, he's basically out of college sports. I mean, they just kicked him out effectively. But it's so funny too. I was hearing some of the details of it. So they go to I
It's
forgot where
hilarious.
I think it was in Cincinnati, one of these sports books, and the guy tries to book like 100 or maybe actually might be more than might be like $500,000.
He was trying to put down $100,000 bet.
Yeah, $100,000 bet on a random SEC baseball game, which immediately got everyone's like, okay, what are you doing? Go to any small sports book and try to bet them. Even go to Vegas and suddenly put an enormous amount of money on a game no one's paying attention to, and they're going to notice as well. So, but apparently, this guy they sent to be their like point person, he was like like just incredibly bad at his work. He was like telling the guys, like, come on, got to get this bet in. And eventually they kind of talked him down. They said, we won't let you bet all of that. We'll let you bet 15,000. And he was getting like really upset. And he's like, I got to get this in now. I have information. He showed them the text from the coach. Like
That's the best part.
I mean, he literally gave all the information to the casino, and I mean, like I love how stupid that is because it's like sometimes you'll in life people will have a moment where you think you're being helpful by giving information without realizing it you're literally giving it to your opponent. And I mean, he forgot that.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, the NCAA is your opponent, but if you're a gambler, the betting, like who you're betting with, is your opponent. The people who made the odds are the opponent. You're trying to be smarter than the casino. You don't go to the casino and say, hey, I have some inside information that is completely illicit that's going to change the outcome of this game. They're not going to take your bet. So yeah, that whole story is just so bonkers. And the more details you read about it, the more you just like these are the stupidest people on earth who got in trouble. And drag that
yeah.
coach with them.
And the funny part about it is sort of like he really could have gotten away with it because basically they told him like, "Hey, for what you're trying to bet on, we're just going to limit you to $10,000." And then if he would have just did that, he probably would have got away with it. But it was the fact he kept insisting, "No, let me get my full $100,000 on this." That raised everyone's eyebrows. And then he's like sitting there showing him. I can't believe. I wish I could see the video footage just to see how stupid this played out with him literally holding the phone up and showing me, yes, look what I have. Look at the inside information I have that in reality, like there's a reason where there's like a whole like system of agreements between basically all these sports leagues and these sports books because it's very easy to bankrupt a sports book if you can actually fix a game and be able to bet on it.
Exactly. Hey, John, I see your hand up. Did you want to add to this?
Yeah, I just want to say I wonder who's the stupider person in this situation. That guy himself, for not of course the guy who went to the actual sports bet for that coach, or the coach himself, knowing this who probably how what type of guy this guy is, and trusting him with his essentially his future livelihood and his life. I'm not sure who the dumber person is in this situation. That's I'm not that's the most mind boggling part is that guy probably knew this. The coach probably knew this guy pretty well.
Well, I
You
think
know
there
that
was actually a
happened to do
group.
this
From what
and
I
like
understand, there was a group of them. So there was one guy who was actually more savvy and was also like a very avid gambler who was like a friend of the program and had connections in Ohio with a bunch of other folks in the area. And then there was a group of them. So I think it might have been one of this Ohio group of friends that went in to do it, but they picked literally the worst possible person to do it. The one who had no savvy, no panache, the person who'd be the worst spy in history. Um, or the worst, the worst informant, can you imagine this person at like a really high stakes mob meeting, like talking to somebody and like leaning his chest out, kind of like trying to bring the mic closer to, can you speak closer to my buttons? I just want you to speak to my chest, Don Corleone. It's utterly, I've never seen something this dumb, and it's impressive. I mean, you have to imagine that coach is sort of like, are you kidding me? You showed them the text. You showed them the text. But no.
Yeah, I would say if he was if he was a sniper, he would be wearing lights and neon to the field. I just I don't it's just it almost feels like a bad TV skit.
Yeah.
Like it almost doesn't seem real.
Can you just look this way? Just look this way. Let's say, so imagine like the enemy at the gates, the bottom Battle of Stalingrad, and seeing him as a sniper. Just, hey, could you Nazis like look this way? Don't fire weapons. Just raise your hand. Anywho, another thing, obviously, I've kind of touched on a little bit is the SEC and Big Ten have formed their advisory committee. Where it's going, it's like, are we going to get them being nefarious and pushing people out? I mean, let's be clear. The next 2 seasons, we have a 12-team playoff for sure, but there is no plan for what comes afterwards. So I'm pretty sure, at least for the 2024 and 2025 season, we're going to have a 12-team playoff. Things are going to go as they are, but it's people are not without reason to be a little bit wary of where things are going. I mean, suddenly you have the two biggest conferences coming together now. Are they going to be a benevolent dictatorship? I don't know. Maybe dictatorship's not quite right. Maybe not triumvirate. You need one more. But are they going to be like a duopoly kind of dictating how things are going to work? There is a thought because, for example, the NCAA seems to have accepted the fact that things are going to change, and that's when you had Charlie Baker, the NCAA president's proposal to create sort of a not breakaway, but like a new division for the top football teams. But I'm not sure it's going to be enough, especially with all the litigation that's coming, and the NCAA is pretty much doomed. Not doomed, but I mean their ability to stop things from going, I think, to employees, especially what we just so happened at Dartmouth of all places, seems to be pretty tenuous at best. There is the thought that, and it's an interesting thought, that has the NCAA just lost so much credibility, the name has been so tarnished that maybe this would be an opportunity for a new association sort of spearheaded by the SEC and Big Ten. Perhaps they would need to be included. I think the problem is they have to be careful. We saw what happened in soccer when people tried to form a super league and you ended up with revolts in a lot of random places. I don't know if that might happen, but if the Big Ten and SEC were to suddenly say, like, okay, let's create a new football-only division association, we'll create a commissioner. And, some people said Sankey would be an interesting one. I mean, the dream would be someone like a Nick Saban, but let's try and make top college football its own conference, and then move everyone back in every other sport into the NCAA, keep it there, and maybe even go back to the old conferences to make a little more sense out of it. I mean, you can go into dreamy land there a little bit. I mean, but realistically, though, I think, for example, this week, yesterday, I should say, and today, there is the CFP meetings going on in Dallas. And the timing was kind of interesting because they seemed to be quite skeptical about what was going to be taking place, how things were going to turn out. Because, of course, the way the CFP decisions are structured, it has to be unanimous vote. And the Pac-12 still exists with two very, very upset teams in it. And they are not likely to necessarily want to just go along with everything. So there has been a rumor that they are trying to, and maybe this has been, I haven't had a chance to read all the news this evening, but they are trying to leverage their ability to hold up all decision making on promises for payouts that would continue beyond 2025. Based on what I just said earlier, you can see how that might be a problem, because if there is no playoff arrangement beyond 2025 and this new SEC Big Ten arrangement decides to create a new playoff where all the college football teams would go to, they might just wait out the remaining the surviving Pac-2 teams and see where it goes. I'm not saying they would totally box them out, not want them to participate in a new particular football playoff or football organization, but it seems like that may just contribute to potential loggerheads on where this might go. Now, again, I will acknowledge the potential dark scenario here. The evil scenario would be the two conferences decide to just make it about themselves, to take their 34 teams and stage their own national championship. I mean, there would be a TV market for it, certainly, but it would antagonize, it would create a lot of stress. And frankly, is again another point I've heard, and I believe it was Dan Wetzel who pointed out, it's like you got to play somebody. You got to play other teams. You don't want to just keep playing the best teams. You do want those FCS programs, those G5 programs, as well as frankly, some other of these the other teams that are in the mid two or the other part of the P4. That John, I see your hand up.
I was going to say, I think you guys kind of summarized it best with the NCAA, where you guys put that fake grade stand was saying we've tried nothing and we're all out of ideas. The NCAA like did this to themselves. They've had decades that really approach this issue properly, and they've really just put themselves in this hole because they have been completely non-proactive and really anti-proactive when it comes to the sport as a whole.
Absolutely, yeah. They've been too. They for the longest time wanted to just pretend like they would win every case, and would operate under that assumption. And finally, it came apart. There was, and I know it's behind a paywall for a lot of people, but there was a decent article by Stuart Mandel in The Athletic, kind of going over the 10 of the many moments of watching the NCAA's power erode since 1977, when Tark the Shark first challenged a decision to punish him by the NCAA. But it sort of shows how, again, especially in the last, I would say, 20 years, the NCAA kind of had hints that things were going in this direction, but never created a contingency plan. And so, yeah, as soon as NIL was the greatest example, when California um, passed the legislation and then the NCAA slapped them down in the Alford case, slightly different reasoning, but made it clear that good luck trying to win in any courtroom. If you come back here, we're gonna break you apart, or at least hit you again. That really caught them surprisingly flat-footed, because that's the thing. I mean, right now with what Charlie Baker's doing, you can sense that at least they have the concept of contingency planning. But I think the conferences have been a little bit more smart about it. They've been a little more proactive about it, especially now. And this advisory group seems to be the next step. I mean, there have been comments that Tony Petitti came in wanting to kind of at least have a détente, I mean, rather than a Cold War with Greg Sankey. And so they've been meeting on a pretty frequent basis. So I think maybe they're trying to come up with a way to be leaders, when I think there's been a lot of grumbling that there is no real leadership. Interesting. I'm just going to note one more thing before I also see Ski Mask Murphy's hands up. One of the other kind of factors in this is today, and I want to state that this is not. Some people are seeing this as a defeat. It's not. A judge denied Tennessee's request for a temporary restraining order, because some people may know that the NCAA is going after Tennessee over some supposed NIL violations that really, the details that have come out don't seem all that severe. It just seems like suddenly in the last few months, NIL rules are suddenly being enforced by the NCAA. But Tennessee and, of course, Virginia joined their attorney general in challenging the law. But Tennessee requested also a temporary restraining order, which would basically, it would keep the NCAA from being able to enforce its rules. Now, this has worked before. In the state of West Virginia, states managed to, last month, or two, actually, no, I guess it's 2 months ago in December, put a temporary restraining order on the NCAA transfer rule, because they were trying to bring back the transfer rule into force, where undergrads wouldn't be able to constantly move without not talking about the graduate transfer rule, but to reduce the number of transfers. And it got successfully, not only, well, the case hasn't resolved, but they got a judge to agree to do a temporary restraining order, so the NCAA has not been able to enforce it, so the door is still open to whoever wants to transfer in the portal. This particular situation, the judge said, while it seems like the merits of the Tennessee-Virginia arguments will probably win, or at least have the ability to win under Sherman antitrust law, he didn't see the value in granting the temporary restraining order for now. So that doesn't mean Tennessee's lost. It just means there's somewhat of different standards, different bars of requirements to grant certain things. And this judge didn't necessarily see the necessity to rush this temporary restraining order through, and feels it's fine just letting the case move forward, while noting that it seems like the arguments of Tennessee and Virginia may be strong enough to defeat the NCAA on this particular issue. Ski Mask Murphy, what's up?
Yeah, you sort of started leaning to the second topic I wanted to talk about. So I think it just happened like yesterday, but I didn't dig too deep into it. But Dartmouth winning, well, seemingly winning their case, similar to Northwestern did years ago with their
Mm-hmm.
basketball players, now being considered employees of the university and can potentially move towards unionizing. How do you feel about that, and what do you see happening this time versus what happened with Northwestern?
Yeah, it was interesting because this case to give people a heads up. So out in Dartmouth, which is of course right on the border of New Hampshire and Vermont. It's technically in New Hampshire, but the Ivy League school had an NLRB, National Labor Relations Board regional ruling, because they break up this federal administrative organizations broken up into regions. So the local region decided to rule that the union election for Dartmouth's men's basketball team could go ahead and move forward. The Region One, and it's not a judge is kind of is a weird way to phrase it, because these are administrative laws a little bit wacky. I mean, it can be appealed to a higher court, but it's slightly different than, let's say, like a traditional court ruling. But Lorna Sachs of the Region One, which is based in Boston, and whereas this is the closest district that's in the region that Dartmouth is in, determined players are employees under the NLRB primarily because the players perform work in exchange for compensation. So this isn't a shocker when you hear it phrased that way. This is a very plain reading of, I think, how a lot of people see student athletes in their roles in the university, particularly now that they're being compensated, particularly since universities are full of student employees, people who are doing work study programs or whatever. So this particular administrative person for the NLRB said the players are, in other words, students and employees. So Dartmouth is almost certainly going to ask the agency's national board in Washington to conduct a review. So that's their version of the appeals process, and it could after, again, the wheels of justice turn slowly. It could be a few years and could end up in front of the Supreme Court, because this is all federal. Um, but for now, that means the players can vote on forming a union. As I recall, Northwestern players didn't vote to form a union when they had the opportunity. But it'll be interesting to see here if they move forward to do it. I have to say, though, we've been waiting for moments like this. I don't know if this particular ruling is going to be what opens up the dam. But it's one of the cracks, and one of the expected cracks, because realistically, with how things are going across the nation, with all the different litigation, with the different maneuvers that are being made, and sometimes unintentionally, because you'll hear some people say, like, "Oh, we don't want the players to be employees," while their legislators, and who they may have very well voted for, are also trying to pass laws saying the NCAA can't enforce its rules, and to strengthen the NIL deals. And it's any judge, a lot of, I mean, the ruling here, the saying that, in effect, that these students are basically getting work for compensation. This is Dartmouth, okay? This is an Ivy League school. They don't get scholarships, but there's still enough work being done here. There's still enough goods being exchanged for services, that they were willing to say that these people are employees. If you look at FBS, I mean, can you imagine? It's like, we're all littered with this stuff. I mean, like, we're just waiting for a judge to make an even clearer ruling. Not necessarily someone working for the NLRB, but I mean, someone who is actually in a court of law to rule explicitly that students are employees. It's inevitable. I mean, it is foolish to think that it's not inevitable. I'm saying that just pure realism. If I was if I was advising someone, in my background as an attorney, I would say like this isn't an if, this is a when. So what happened at Dartmouth this week is just another one of the bigger cracks to form. I think it's going to get less attention because it's Dartmouth men's basketball, because it's non-scholarship, even though it's D1 basketball. It is absolutely worth paying attention to, because this is going to be another one that is going to be probably, while it's not going to be controlling, it's not a precedent for a court of law in other states. I'm going to guarantee you judges are still allowed to look at it. They're going to probably go, huh, yeah, that's persuasive. When they're going to make another decision somewhere else, they're going to say like they'll point to that NLRB decision and use that as an example. So I want to caution that putting it realistically is important, and it is a sign of potentially things to come. John, and then Ski Masks Murphy.
So hypothetically, it's a very big hypothetical. Let's say this all gets through. The unionize, they essentially decide, hey, we're going to pay these athletes. What do you think a substitute for colleges, universities to get around this would be? Essentially take away scholarships and then have the scholarship money doled out as a salary versus them just getting a straight scholarship. So in a way, they are still getting paid, but there it's not any cost loss to a university. I just say that because I I imagine, of course, the doomsday scenario of, of course, you have to pay all the athletes in your athletic program, which leads to either programs shutting down on the smaller scale or on for bigger programs even cutting sports. So I'm kind of curious on what a potential workaround would be done by the universities, because they're going to try something to work around this if it ever actually did occur.
Yeah, no, there's only so much I think they could do in the sense of like taking a scholarship, getting rid of it, and just handing them the cash for school. I think that might. I'm not sure if that would be, because you're going to end up asking yourself what market rate is. So if you can't have all the universities colluding together, because that's going to be that's one quick way to get a court mad at you. I'm not honestly, I'm not sure that they could pull that off. I think it'll be interesting to see, though. I think the bigger concern is if the universities are forced to pay all athletes the same amount of money. Some schools, we've talked about this in previous shows, are going to be in a real bad situation. And some of the schools are surprising because, for example, Auburn does not field that many teams. So, yeah, they'll pay all their football players, who are probably they'll still be in the black, funding the football team, but they don't have that many. It's like 16 teams. Somebody mentioned somewhere, but I mean, it's like 33,000 something athletes, which is on the low side. Meanwhile, Stanford likes to compete in everything. Oddly enough, we were just talking about earlier. Boston College likes to compete in a lot of sports that not everyone does, like hockey. And so suddenly we have a team that's got 1,000 extra students that they've got to pay. And you're right; those would be the ones where you're a little concerned. If they have to pay them all the same amount of money, they may look at some of those other sports a little harder and say, like, are we getting or what are we getting from this sport? And even though college athletics, especially the vast majority of sports which are non-revenue, were really just to give opportunities to give people a fuller college experience, maybe give some opportunities for some folks to attend college that may not have been able to, or at least based on a reward athletic talent. They're suddenly forced into a cost benefit analysis that may not be tenable. Now, the the hope is that, and this is where it gets funny. The idea of creating a separate association, either, I'm not sure, Charlie Baker's, even though it's within the NCAA, would still kind of apply, but especially, let's say, hypothetically, this new SEC Big Ten Advisory Committee creates a football only rival to the NCAA. That would be competition. And that's good, because then suddenly you actually get a lot of the courts off your back. And if we allow the football teams to be in their own little zone with their own rules, perhaps what's affecting the rest of the sports might not require the same amount of difficulty, especially if it might cut down on the amount you have to pay everybody. But the idea of taking a scholarship and just getting rid of it and paying them the cash, I'm not sure that would be enough, for a lot of reasons, and certainly it would create. There's got to be some ripples there. It's an interesting idea, though.
Yeah. Yeah, could they work around and call them seasonal employees and then try to use that as a as a way to work around, like, quote unquote?
Yeah, all right. Yeah, they all go back home over the summer, so they're migrant workers. Yeah, I was trying to imagine like some of these arguments. Oh my goodness. Ski Master Murphy, you've been really patient.
Yeah. I was gonna say that it feels like, I mean, it took a while for Northwestern to do their case, and now Dartmouth really only like 10 years later. It feels like a lot of athletes are going to be able to keep making this case again and again to at least be considered somewhat, at least minimally part-time employees, because like it's within the agreements of the NCAA that no student can participate in more than 20 hours of athletically related activities. But everyone knows like these schools, because it says no more than 20 doesn't mean they're not going to push it, and they basically require them all to get, you know, 4 hours, 4 days a week. Then their competition day. Then
Yeah.
like a little bit of stuff outside of that, like in football, like trying to require you to read your playbook and stuff like that. And then you also have like I know Alabama abuses it to the most, like that the out of school period where class is no longer in session. So basically, like that 20-hour limit does not apply per week anymore, and they just put them through the ringer, which is normally their time building up to the to a playoff or a national title. And I think like once you add it up, it's going to be easy for like athletes to keep making and making this case again. I think eventually the NCAA is just going to lose. They're going to have to figure something out soon.
Yeah, and that's why, as crazy as it sounded, I'm wondering if this is the way it'll have to be, that the NCAA will not necessarily be gotten rid of, but they'll just simply happily allow football to depart. Because that's the thing too; they don't make, for those, I mean, anyone who's listening usually in an off season probably is a little more knowledgeable about this stuff. So I'm not trying to say y'all don't know this, but I mean, the NCAA doesn't really make money off of football. They make it off of college basketball tournament. That's where they make the vast majority of their money. Maybe in another 10 years, they'll even make a little bit of money off of the NCAA hockey tournament. I think they do make some off of it, but only it's not nearly as big, and it's really just the Frozen Four. But the it was interesting too. I believe the CFP only has to pay the NCAA like $10,000 per game. Like that is literally because it's just the flat fee. The NCAA just hasn't changed the rules, so they treat it just like a bowl game. Even though the amount of money there is obviously quite a bit higher than that. So the idea of them leaving and creating a football only conference that removes them from the whole issue that could affect. Because again, I'm sympathetic more than most people are to the NCAA, not because I think they're right. I think they've made so many mistakes, but because they also have so many teams that are in, not only the rest of D1, including FCS, but they have D2 and D3. So there's a lot of schools out there that are watching all of this, kind of a little nervous, kind of a little horrified, because I was just having this discussion the other day with someone. I'm like, every now and again you'll hear, oh, usually one or two teams a year, one or two universities a year announces, we're adding football, we're adding an NAIA football team, we're adding a D3 football team. And even the D2 football team, it's often a ploy. You'll usually see the schools a little on the smaller side, especially if it's a private school that has been kind of dwindling in enrollment. Adding a football team, suddenly you get, even D2, handful of scholarships. You're going to get a bunch of non-scholarship people that are paying retail price to go to the university. And the idea of suddenly disrupting all of these are not athletic departments that can afford to pay anybody. So there might be ways around it. I'm not sure, but even at the D1 level, can you imagine? Well, I mean, I hate always picking on them, but what will this do to poor old Akron? There's a lot of questions if Akron should even, when they were people may not realize they were not. I mean, it was like '93 when they moved up from FCS. Will they end up being like Idaho and having to eventually move back down, or will they just have to drop a bunch of sports? Those are the other teams that I think are in concern, and I think that's why the NCAA sometimes acts a little strange, and why I think maybe the way things are going, they would be a little more relieved if the SEC and Big Ten and their advisory group just elects to create something for all these troublemaking football teams to to go and move to so that they can, go back to being an administrative organization that is more focused on the other sports and all the other thousands of athletes that aren't being dragged into this. But it's a thought. I don't know. So, another interesting thing, again, some of these stories, apparently we're going to get a new joint sports streaming platform this year. ESPN, Fox, and Warner Brothers Discovery. I forgot, I think that's technically the name of the company now. I still remember when it was Time Warner and then Time Warner AOL because I'm really old. They are going to apparently create some joint streaming sports platform this year. Not going to be a fan of it. It's sort of funny. When I read that, I'm like, they have come together to form what we're going to call a cable company. Or it's like we saw all of these the cord cutting. We saw all of these streaming options. People have gotten really, I think, tired of them. And now it seems like things just keep getting a little bit murkier. Ski Master Murphy, I saw your hand up.
Just seems like another awful idea from all the what is it? Is it like I don't know? They all do merges off, and I don't know if it's even six anymore. Is it like the big four media companies now? But this just seems like another horrible idea that they've all cooked up, and I think they realize that sports is really thing on the only thing really on television that there's a need to see it live and see it actually happen because no one wants to watch a rerun of a football game when everybody already knows it happens. It's like trying to watch the Super Bowl on Monday. It is you're not gonna want to watch it because you already know the result. Everyone's told you what's gonna happen. Versus a TV show where you just get the thrill of it when you feel like getting the thrill of it, and it's when it actually happens in real life, it's gonna be the exact same thing every time when you watch the TV show. You watch a specific episode, but every game is different because there's different things going on with the players, yada yada. But I think this is just another bad move, and I think all these media companies trying to sort of vertically integrate the whole process of film from production to viewer has backfired on them a lot. Because I don't know if you're aware, but I think Peacock, Disney Plus, and Paramount Plus are all losing around half $1.5 billion a year on their networks. So I don't know if this is gonna fix it for them, but I do know as far as Disney goes, ESPN is their extreme moneymaker. I forgot which company put out the what do you call it? The where they all come together for the shareholders meeting, and they put out all the numbers for Disney. And I think this may be media's last big opportunity to try to keep making money before it sugar fails.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right on that. I mean, because ESPN historically was Disney's cash cow. I mean, right into I'd say the mid 2010s, it still was. I mean, it was just incredible the amount of money ESPN was generating because the percentage of your cable bill that was just going to pay for ESPN is something I think some people never even comprehended until some of the fights started to erupt about 10 years ago, a little more than 10 years ago, where the numbers were actually being kind of mentioned as like DirecTV or Dish and some of these other networks were starting to complain about the money that was getting, and also like the Pac-12 network was failing at trying to get that same kind of money that they thought they could get, which obviously didn't work out. So that's when we started to hear all of these things, and I think a lot of people, especially non-sports fans, are getting really pissed about that because I mean you can't blame them. I mean I'm paying how much per month for TV I don't watch, and the majority of your cable bill in some cases, or at least a significant chunk. So we led to the cord cutting, which is continuing. I think this is certainly. I don't know how they're going to sell this. Like this seems like such a bad idea, and I agree because I am one of the people that when I can get a chance, I will fully admit I do YouTube TV for the season, and then happily cancel at the end of the season. And even then, I'm getting a little more annoyed because the price keeps going up on YouTube TV. Um, and one thing that came up last summer, right before the Pac-12 imploded, was the terrible, well, not terrible, but the deal that was offered, the one that caused the deal to, or I should say, the rest of the teams that were going to leave to finally leave, was one built around using Apple, built around streaming built around, milestones that may or may not be met. And the interesting kind of side discussion was, even though I think it was pretty universally agreed, even with people that uh, we're kind of discussing the future of media, that at least for this round, that was just not an attractive deal. However, people in the know, at least those that are used to forecasting where media is going, said the deal the Pac-12 saw is probably the kind of deal that we're going to see the next time the Big Ten and SEC media deals come up. And the hope is that streaming services will be strong enough that they can offer a comparable amount to what they can offer now. But what the Pac-12 was being offered was basically a prospective, hopeful, like maybe this is the future of how cable is going to be distributed. Well, it is almost certainly the future, particularly the next 10 years of how it's going to evolve. But the numbers just weren't close to what could be provided by traditional terrestrial cable channels. So that is it. It's interesting to look at, and when you look at this ESPN Fox Warner Brothers joint sports streaming platform concept, it seems like they're trying to come up with some kind of middle ground and trying to come up with something that works. But I think it's also a sign that they're all frankly quite desperate because they don't exactly know how to match the peak of this channel, which was sports channels about 15 years ago, when they were at the peak of their strength and control. Because now this kind of the cord cutting, which is again not necessarily, I'm not in any way denigrating it. I think it made a lot of sense, but this kind of collapse of the cable empires into these disparate factions has sort of led to this. John, your hands up.
Yeah. So 2 points. First being, I feel at this point streaming services are, and cable is just the animal farm analogy. We essentially chased out the farmers that were cable, and now the pigs are playing human inside the house. I mean, it's just we're hitting that crucial point where now it's hard to tell the difference of what was cable and what is a streaming service, other than convenience. Second thing I was going to put, not as related, but I see ESPN lose money every year, and especially on streaming. I beg ask the question, what where are they losing the money at? As someone who recently got into ESPN Plus, I felt bamboozled for what I was paying for. It barely works half the time, and when it does work, I feel like I'm watching something that was recorded on a 1986 camcorder. Two guys commentating that sound like they came from a local bar, and it feels like the whole thing is running on hope and dreams. I'm just really curious where ESPN is losing the money at this point.
Well, I think part of the loss is just the reduction in the amount of cable subscriptions. That's what's been hurting them. And it's interesting too, because that's been a bigger question in a lot of business reporting on what's going on in media. I remember there was a New York Times article over the summer about how ESPN went from like Disney's financial engine to kind of a problem. And the concern is ESPN's best days are kind of behind them. Again, as Ski Mask Murphy provided a tweet that's now at the top of the screen, but it kind of gets into the details that he was talking about, where at a shareholder meeting, ESPN still delivers more than $16 billion for Disney's financial year in 2022, and $2.9 billion in profit. Uh, so that it is still, I guess, it is still a bit of a moneymaker, at least overall, but it is decreasing, and that is the bigger concern. And I think everyone has watched this slow decline, um, and that's a concern, because remember, what Wall Street wants is growth. And if ESPN isn't actually growing, that's making puts Disney in an awkward position where, at least for their own, because I mean, ultimately they only care about the shareholders. They're not gonna. It's not where it was, and it forces them to look elsewhere. Ski Mask Murphy, I know your hands up, or was up.
Oh, you were basically explaining what I was gonna say after I put put the information up on the Summer Jam screen. But yeah, I think it's a little surprising. I think most people will be surprised like how much ESPN and ABC Sports are like really like a massive profit arm of the total conglomerate that is Disney. And I think, yeah, to go to your point and what John was trying to question is like, it's not that, ESPN's doing bad and like they still make a good profit. It's like because the numbers just slowly going down. Disney's worried, and I'm guessing if we looked at other similar companies, they'd probably be worried as well with their sports packages and how it's all really just connected to cable and how everyone's cutting the cord. But yeah, John, to your ESPN Plus statement, I mean, for me, when I first got it for $5 a month, it's a lot of content, but it's like I don't know. There was like that one network before it became like the ACC network, where it's like you're literally just seeing like all the regional games, and it's little
Yes, yes.
because I've
Well, I mean,
watched
it feels
it
like they're filling. Yeah, it feels like they're filling the games on a potato. Like I don't understand. Like how I feel like if someone could bring their iPhone, I could watch the game better on the iPhone versus
yeah,
some of the camera work I see sometimes.
yeah, a lot of those games you can tell ESPN did not provide any of those cameras. It's
Yeah,
whatever
they
they had in
believe
the stadium.
I believe they hire local production crews to kind of cover this because they simply don't have the sheer amount of equipment to cover all of those, and they hire local talent to also do that. It's almost like the farm version of it's like the minor leagues, which I'm sure. Oh gosh, I know exactly the network you're talking about, and it's bugging me because I've watched it before. Oh, the predecessor to the ACC network that used to carry all the second tier games in the east and the south, the mid Atlantic and the southeast region. Oh my goodness, try to remember that one, but I'll remember in a second. But yeah, no, I see with what you're saying there, and that's one of my favorite games I ever watched. I may have mentioned this in the past is New Mexico State game when they hosted Minnesota, and the only people they had to film the game were actually the student, like New Mexico State's like student TV. And New Mexico State might be like, I didn't know they had a student TV. I didn't know they had a film production or whatever. I'm not sure it was like a full on school. So that was some of the strangest camera work I have ever seen in a college football game because it was literally undergrads trying to figure out how to film a New Mexico State versus a Big Ten school. It was chaotic. It was a mess. And you felt bad for them because you're kind of like, I don't know if I would have done any better in undergrad, but you're kind of like, I'm watching a college football game where they're all learning on the job. And it felt kind of awkward, and it was very someone who lives in Minnesota to kind of fit the Minnesota thing. I mean, it's either that start there and end your season in the Quick Lane Bowl. That's Minnesota football for you. Excuse me, ask Murphy.
Raycom Sports. I had to look it up.
Yeah, but there was another one too. It wasn't just Raycom. I swear.
Raycom, I know Raycom Valley has a different amount of them. Spectrum had their own ones, but it was Raycom. But I know the other one
Jefferson
that I
Pilot.
also
Jefferson Pilot. That was. I
there.
think they were related because I remember you'd occasionally see the Jefferson Pilot logo come on. But I guess they were related to Raycom in some form or another. But that reminds me.
The Spectrum Sports as well too was one, right?
That sounds about right. And I think they still technically have the license to the Hawaii home games in some way. That will always end up with a weird kind of setup to watch those games where I think they shifted finally to pay per view in the state of Hawaii, but it's not pay per view for all of us outside of Hawaii because that is by far one of the strangest broadcasting deals in college. Oh my goodness! You know what? It has been about an hour. I think I'm going to slowly wrap this up, just so we can get a nice tight hour bowed on this one. It's off season. We'll save some stuff for next week. Who knows what's going to happen between now and then? Maybe Bill O'Brien will be the next head coach of Boston College. Maybe we'll find out who is his replacement. Maybe Chip Kelly will be in the NFL. I mean, there's so many random stories out there that. It's hard to predict. I love it. I mean, we never got to the fact that Mizzou apparently got a $62 million gift, 12 of which will go to the NIL initiative with an anonymous donor. So again, it's interesting to see some of these moves. Who knows what the SEC and Big Ten will do in their new advisory groups? They've not been optimistic about what was going to go on in the CFP meetings in Dallas yesterday and today. We'll see. There's so many things that could go wrong. John, I see your hand up. Did you want to add something before we take off?
Yep, real quick. Who you think wins on Sunday?
Oh man, NFL. All right. So I have a good friend who's a huge NFL guy, and he invited me to because his team, and I respect this. He stuck with this way beyond where most people would stop. So he was a huge Joe Montana fan. So you think, oh, he's a 49ers guy. No, he stuck with Joe Montana when he went to the Kansas City Chiefs. And then when he retired with the Kansas City Chiefs, he stayed a Kansas City Chiefs fan because that was where Joe Montana finished his career. So I went with him. We grew up in Bakersfield together, right? So I went with him on his 40th birthday. We went to his very first Kansas City Chiefs game in person. So I kind of respect the Chiefs because of that. This is several years ago at this point, probably 5 years ago, and so I'm thinking they're going to win. But that is my completely unscientific bet on that. Ski Mask Murphy, I see your hand up, and I'm sure John has his thoughts.
I'm going with the 49ers just specifically because of their offense. I mean, this is a little inside baseball, but because they have no true personnel package to those that make sense. They have no true 21 personnel, 12 personnel because of the interchangeability of Christian McCaffrey, Debo Samuel, George Kittle, and Kyle Juszczyk. I think there's going to be certain plays where they go like how Oklahoma used to go, where they would shoot down the field, where it's like, hey, we're just going to know how to get up to the line as quick as possible, give you no chance to sub, and we're going to exploit a mismatch that you didn't know was on the field. And I think San Francisco can do that with basically like their interchangeable pieces on offense. That's what I'm going to pick. And also, I don't want Taylor Swift to win.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Oh my goodness. So we got T Swift in there too. Oh my goodness. John, what's your thought on the game?
yeah, I think I think the winner will be Taylor Swift on Sunday. I think that's what's going on Sunday, right? It's a Taylor Swift concert. I didn't know there was an actual game. I just thought we were all there for to watch a Taylor Swift stream. That's weird, but yeah, I think it's I'll probably I think I gotta go see him. I think the 49ers. I hate to say it because as a Falcons fan, I can't stand watch Kyle Shanahan win a Super Bowl, considering what happened to us several years ago. But I do think the 49ers win. I suffer. Taylor Swift fans do not suffer, and I think everyone still has a good time watching the game anyway, no matter what anyone's been saying online.
Man, I am so old. I was just thinking that because we use a college football, we have a not a college football, we have a Slack channel to talk, how we run things, and we have lots of side conversations. And I said literally today, I'm like, I was so out of touch in 2016. I even found my message to the group in 2016. I'm like, I see you, Taylor Swift as a disposable pop culture icon. And then I went like, and I actually found the comments I made years later, and I'm like, you know what? I think the shelf life is a little longer because I always judge people up against Madonna because that was like somebody who stayed relevant forever, right? And I think, well, maybe she's done that. She's somehow galvanized another generation, the Gen Zers, to be into her. So more power to her, more power to that, and we'll see. I mean, I think there's an untapped market. She should do a collaboration with Insane Clown Posse. I'm not a juggalo, but I think it would be hilarious to see Swifties and juggalos get together, maybe get a song like "Magnetic Love," something like that. I don't know. Ski Mask Murphy, because we're really far afield here as we're kind of slowly wrapping this up, but I'll let you go, Ski Mask Murphy.
Okay, since allegedly she's going to remix the song, and you were talking about music, do you know what swag surfing is?
What? I didn't hear what you said.
Are you aware what swag surfing is? Because she's planning to remix the song, so you're probably gonna hear it.
Uh, I am not, and I am now. My age is absolutely coming out.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I really I really hope she becomes like a fan of like a big Alabama fan or Georgia or USC fan next year. I want her to just keep taking over the football
Oh
market.
my gosh.
Go for college football next year, just for the chaos, man. Let's go full chaotic in the fall.
All right. Well, we'll see if it goes in that direction. What way to wrap this one up on college football here on our CFB Talk 180. Well, we're gonna go and tie the bow on this one. My name is Bobak Ha'Eri. If you missed the beginning of this, it automatically turns into a recording. We'll be sure to put a recording of this into wherever you get your podcast is our CFB Talk. It's always a pleasure talking to all of you. It's always a pleasure listening to those of you who want to come up here and talk. Of course, John and Ski Master Murphy, it's always great having you up here. Every Tuesday night we do these. Feel free to join us. Feel free to add to the conversation, hit request. But we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up right now. Thanks so much for listening. Now I'm going to hang up and listen.